What's up, everybody? This is Leo from Japan Documented. Today we're sitting down with Chris Hart, one of the most popular foreign pop artists in Japan. With over 16 years in Japan, Chris has captivated audiences with his voice and unique connection to Japanese culture. From performing some of Japan's biggest stages to becoming a cultural ambassador with music, his journey is nothing short of remarkable. So stick around to hear how he made it all happen. Enjoy the video. What's your name?
My name is Chris Hart.
Where are you from?
I'm originally from San Francisco, California.
And how long have you been living in Japan?
I have been in Japan now for about 16 years almost.
16 years.
Yeah.
Would you mind telling me what happened 16 years ago or maybe before that?
Yeah, my first trip to Japan was when I was 12. So this is about 1998. I came for a 2-week homestay from that was introduced to me by my middle school back in, it was originally Palo Alto, California. But I did the 2 weeks here and I just fell in love with being in Japan. And I knew I wanted to live in Japan if possible. So I went back to the States, kept studying Japanese, and then with friends started doing bands where I would sing in Japanese. So I've always been singing in Japanese even in the States. But that was what started it, and then officially 16 years ago I moved to Japan.
Wow, all right, very compact.
Yeah.
All right, so when you were 12, you came here first time, you
Yeah.
said. So did you grow up always like wondering what the country would be like? Or?
No, it just was by chance. It was very rare at that time for Japanese to be taught in schools. My parents and my sister had studied Spanish, and I just didn't want to do that. So there was Japanese, so I thought I'd try that, and I just really enjoyed the culture and the language. And my teacher at the time knew that I had an interest in studying more, so she suggested I do the homestay, and that changed everything.
Okay. Oh, wow. So were you rather an exception at the school, or?
No, it was terrible. I was a terrible student, but the only things I really had a passion for were Japanese and music. So it was kind of something that I think my teacher understood, was that amongst my very bad subjects that I didn't pay much attention to, I tried very hard with Japanese, and that was something she knew I would probably appreciate. So doing that homestay kind of changed my perspective and gave me like a direction.
All right. Do you have any particular examples during the homestay what you liked about?
Yeah, we were in this very small area called Niharimura it was in Ibaraki. So it was like kind of countryside, and it was in the middle of the summer, and it was very hot, and it wasn't anything particularly like stand out or anything that like shocked me. I wasn't really experiencing like culture shock, but it was very, very fun, and it was very easy to like spend my days with friends, and everyone was really nice, and they wanted to make sure that I had an experience with Japanese culture. So they would take us to different places, we tried different foods, and everything just kind of felt really natural. I don't know why it kind of hit like that. There wasn't like it wasn't like I was super into anime and that got me into it. It just kind of was like living in Japan felt very natural to me.
You just mentioned hanging out with your friends, right?
Yeah.
Hanging out with your friends in US and in Japan must be different.
Yeah, it's very different. I think in the States it's a lot more rowdy and a lot more like outgoing. I think a lot of times in Japan there's not a lot of like just wild crazy times, much as just kind of just enjoying the moment. So like I remember with my homestay family, we would just sit around and watch TV or read like manga and stuff like that, and that was just it. And that was just really a good time for the summer. Sometimes we'd go like this, the camp thing. We'd like break watermelons and stuff like that. But like it was nothing incredibly like crazy. It was just very, very easygoing, and I think that's what always stuck with me, was just how easy it was just to be in your own place in Japan. So I went back to the States. I studied for a little bit more, and then I graduated high school at 16, and then started studying Japanese a little bit more in college, and then started working or doing music in bands with my Japanese friends. And then that kind of became the thing. I was always trying to find a way to get back to Japan, how to get a visa and things like that. So if I could do it through music, that would be great. If there was something else, that would be great. But it just happened to be that I did music for about 7 years in the States in Japanese. And then that kind of became like normal. Like when I started, I didn't play any rock-related instruments. All I could do was sing. So my friends were like, why don't you try and be the vocalist? And I just kind of kept doing that. So nothing that I really decided. It was just kind of like an easy flow into things.
All right. Because I feel like a lot of people do, trigger the interest in other culture.
That's the part that's very rare about my experience is that I didn't have a deep experience or like incident of like something that just like sparked a massive passion in Japanese culture. Like I knew anime a bit, like at that time it was kind of popular. I'd watched some, but I wasn't extremely into it. I enjoyed Japanese music. That was something I really had a passion for at the time, and I loved doing music. But it wasn't like that was everything that started me into Japanese. I just happened to get into Japanese studying the language, and then really started appreciating the culture via that.
So language was the starting point.
Yeah, language was the starting point.
What about the Japanese language did you like particularly?
It was challenging. It was interesting. It's rare. It's hard. It is very hard. You have to think differently in Japanese. And that didn't really hit me until I started living here. But like it's just there's a different structure, and there's so much that changes in how you talk with other people and how you act when that's like your language. I know now like what I do in English and what I say in Japanese is very different, and even the core emotions around that are different.
All right. Do you have any examples like core emotions?
Like there is, I think I was a lot more forward and outgoing in English. I think I was more like I laughed a lot more in English. I think a lot of people experience that where they're like I was more wild in English. Like it's easier to be straight in English than it is in Japanese. I wouldn't say I hold back in Japanese, but I think I have to think first before I start speaking, because even the structure of the sentences, you kind of have to know exactly where you're going before you start it. So I think it's just a natural flow. You're just kind of, you're a little more careful with your words. You think a little bit more before you speak. And I think over time that kind of makes you change a little bit. I think everyone experiences that when they're bilingual or more, like.
Yeah, right. Is there any particular emotion that you feel you would express yourself differently in Japanese?
There are words that I don't have an English equivalent for, and that's kind of one of the problems that I had was that I studied Japanese in school, and then I had a long break where I was studying independently, but I never had anybody to speak with. So it was one of those things like you can listen to it, you can understand it, but you don't have the courage to talk. And then when I moved to Japan and I had to start speaking with people, I started using only Japanese I learned Japanese through Japanese, not through English. So I don't have equivalent words for the Japanese that I use. Like I know Japanese and Japanese and English and English.
Right.
So there are words like bimyo, like I can't find an English equivalent to that emotion of like it's just like it's not the English like so kind of thing. There's just something about certain words in Japanese that like they just don't translate the way I know they're supposed to mean when I'm in Japanese cultural settings. So it's one of those things that's hard to do. I think you can find close words, but you never really like 100% translate something effectively between two languages and cultures.
So about the culture, Japanese culture, what cultural differences or surprises did you experience after coming to Japan permanently?
That is something I try to think about often is like, was there any cultural surprises or like culture shock that I had? And I didn't, because when I moved to Japan, I decided that I was going to forget everything I knew about American culture and try not to like compare the two. So at the time, I committed to learning Japanese like a baby, which is essentially just if you don't know words, you just got to keep pressing through. Don't use English. Just try and learn Japanese as Japanese. And that extended to the cultural side as well. So it wasn't like, oh, they eat natto. That's so weird. Like it's like, well, this is Japan. They eat natto. This is Japan. Aisatsu is very important. This is Japan. So these are the things that you just start growing and learning about as you're, experiencing them if you were a child. I think that helped me to avoid any culture shock. If anything, after being here for 16 years, now it's like a reverse culture shock, where I'm so used to the rhythm of living in Japan that sometimes I'm not used to how things used to be or still are in the States. So like customer service is one of those things that I always have a problem with when I go back to the States. I'm always like trying to remember that it's not going to be the same way. I remember like just speaking with other people, I'm not as forward, even in English now, because I'm so used to like being in Japan. I think I experience more culture shock the reverse way now.
I get it. All right. Very interesting. So you are, recognized as one of the biggest pop singers in Japan, right? Did you always want to become a pop singer? music?
Not really. I loved music. I always did music, but I never thought I would be in the front doing music. I always thought I would be in the background. So even with like the bands, I intended to be like guitar and back vocalist, but I just kept getting pulled to the front. And then when I came to Japan and there was a TV show that I was on that kind of like sparked that next step into debuting with a major label, it was just kind of like, yeah, we want you to be, you know, the solo artist. And even now, I'm not sure I'm used to it. I love singing. I love doing music. I love producing music. I don't know if I'll ever get used to like being the solo singer guy. It was never something that was like my goal.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah, just everything's just like a flow, a natural flow
All right.
of things that just kind of leads to the next.
All right. So that TV program that made you sort of, get you started. There are also other, actors and many other singers, right?
Yeah.
And among those, you have been one of the most successful singers, I think. What do you believe is the difference between you and the rest of them?
It's hard to pinpoint, but one major thing was my visa was different. Having an artist visa is very difficult to get first, and then it's very limiting when you're trying to use it on a regular basis. It can only be for like 3 to 6 months or 1 year at the most. There's only certain venues you can actually play in. But at the time, I was married, so I was on a spouse visa. So my options to do any kind of job were there. I could do any job. I could perform anywhere. I could do anything. So I think the visa was actually the biggest thing. Not being able to play in certain venues is like very big for certain people in their careers. But beyond that, I don't know. It's hard to say because that depends on what people saw in me that they didn't see in other people, assuming that's a factor. But I think part of what people have said they appreciated about my journey was that I was experiencing Japan in a way that excited them. They were excited to know that somebody enjoyed Japan the same way as them. But also from my experience, since I had been following Japanese culture since I was 12, a lot of the things that people like in my same age range that are memorable are extremely memorable to me too. So songs that were popular then are songs that I remember. I think it's kind of like a light connection of like culture between us that like, I remember what it was like in '98 for Japanese pop media and stuff like that, and shows that were on that time and things that were popular at the time. So I wasn't raised in Japan, but there was that influence that I think connects me to the experience that other people have that makes it easier for us to kind of like connect through music.
Got you. So I have been listening to your music, and your at least when you sing, your Japanese is almost very close to native. Is there any particular, when singing in Japanese, is there any, how do you approach the pronunciation and emotional expressions?
That's a hard thing because I think also that's a part where I benefited from starting early. They say that when you learn languages early, it's easier for your ear to catch certain nuances in the language. Mine is not perfect, but I've done it for now like 20-something years. So you gradually get better as you keep doing it. Pronunciation is, again, I think it's part of it is you have to forget the English side. You can't really focus on singing in Japanese from like an English perspective of like, oh, this is phonetically how I would say it in English. You have to kind of learn it from the Japanese perspective and say, these are the ways that things are pronounced. These are the way the T's are pronounced and not like a hard T like in English. It's very like specific parts, but it's just time and practice, really. That's all.
All right. How did you practice?
I actually did not intend to be a singer, so I didn't really focus that much on it until I came to Japan. And then I met a voice trainer here who kind of taught me more about like the more natural ways of singing in Japanese, and then also just connecting that to the lyrics and really understanding that. I think that's a major thing about Japanese music that's a little bit different from English. I mean, we do have very deep, lyrics in English, but sometimes you don't have to say anything. Sometimes you can just, say la la la, or you can just kind of freestyle or make up new words, and no one really cares because it's kind of like about the rhythm of things. But Japanese is extremely, extremely strict about lyrics. Lyrics are really, really important in Japanese songs, so you have to really commit to singing them, and not just like in a good way, like just being like a good singer. You have to sing it in a way that connects with them and their experiences around the lyrics. And I think that's something that happens with Japanese lyrics, is that they're very connected to Japanese culture and the way people are brought up. So when you're singing a song about like, the springtime, it's not just a song about a flower like sakura. Like you're singing about the graduation the season, or kind of like wakare. What's the word I'm thinking of? Like separation of things. Like everything that is culturally cherished about that season is in those lyrics. So you have to sing it in a way that shows you understand that experience, or else it just kind of comes off as flat.
Maybe that leads to the next question. Sure, there are differences, but do you notice any difference in how Japanese fans and American fans perceive pop music?
It can be very, very difficult. I think even now, because like if you take some place like America, or maybe even like parts of like Europe, there are somewhat cultural and racial elements to pop as well, where they come from, which ones are like, like is it hip hop, is it rock? I think a lot of times people can identify themselves by a genre extremely tightly in Western areas. Like I'm a rock fan, I'm a rap fan, and that's changing a little bit. But in Japan, there's no like commitment to a genre as much. It's more like all pop is the same. So all Japanese people are enjoying all pop, so it's kind of like if you're doing rap one day, that's fine. If you're doing rock one day, that's fine. Your fashion doesn't necessarily commit to any of those particular genres unless you're in a really hardcore, like kind of a subculture. Like hip hop fans are a little more strict, but like if you were talking to any general pop fan, like they don't identify themselves like, oh, I only listen to pop, I only listen to jazz. They're like, I listen to music. And it crosses a lot of borders in there. I think Western culture is a little more strict about that, or at least it was when I was coming up.
Oh, that's very interesting insight. Like Japanese people are more particular about the lyrics.
Yeah,
Whereas the rest, the outside Japan, it's more like.
Yeah, I think because you'll find people who are like, I'm a punk music fan, I'm a rock fan, I'm a rap fan, I'm a pop fan, I'm a fan of K-pop. Like it's very anime fan. Like there's a lot of creating your identity by a certain genre and community that isn't exactly the same or not as strict in Japan. I think subcultures do exist like that in Japan, but even then, most of them in their daily lives would not identify themselves by that. So I think in music and even privately, just I think in the West, there's a lot of segmenting people into different like boxes based on something like income, job, music, and that kind of stuff that just doesn't really happen as much in Japan. This is again why I think I appreciated my time in Japan, was because living in the States from where I was a minority in my community. So I was in a very suburban area with a lot of, essentially like white people and Asians, and I was very rare for black people to be in that area. So I was segmented into that group, and there was an expectation that because I'm black, I must be doing rap, and I must be doing all these other things. And when I came to Japan, none of that was there. I was just the foreigner. That was essentially my group, because I was just not Japanese.
Right.
And I think that's kind of carried out to my experience throughout being in Japan, even in my music career. Like in the States, if I continued pursuing music, I would have probably been an R&B artist, or I would have been like an urban artist. In Japan, I was just a non-Japanese singer. So I don't have a genre of music. So if you listen to any of my albums, it's very broad. There's rap in some songs, there's pop songs, folk songs, ballads, and rock songs. Like it's everything, because they have not boxed me into that to say, I am only this genre artist. I'm just a pop singer who was not Japanese at the time, but is now.
I understand. All right, interesting. So you've been on TV and a lot of big concerts and shows, right?
Yeah.
What has been the most memorable moment in your music career in Japan?
It's hard to pick because there's a lot. There's a lot of stuff that I'm lucky to have experienced. The most formative one was Kohaku with Matsuda Seiko. So that was really what kind of changed the direction of my career, because I was performing with one of the legends of Japanese pop, who does not normally, collaborate with a lot of different people on one of the biggest stages of the year. And from that point, it became very common for me to be able to perform with other legends in the business without it seeming like strange. Like they're like, oh yeah, Chris can sing with these people and he can sing with them and they can do collaborations here. So that was the biggest one, was Kohaku in 2013. Was the biggest, most influential stage. As for me personally, doing Budokan was very fun. That was a big one. 47 prefecture tours, we did that twice. That was cool. I don't know, it's hard to say because they just keep coming. They just keep having, a lot of great stages.
Right. Among a lot of the, your songs that are cover songs,
Yeah.
there are also original songs.
Yeah.
I think the most famous one is "I Love You."
Yeah.
How did you come up with the concept of the song? How did you?
Yeah,
make
so
the song?
that's the weird part of the career kind of flow. We made a demo in 2012, and it was 3 covers and then I Love You, and we weren't sure how we were going to start exactly. So we just made I Love You, and it was a song by a great songwriter, and it's just kind of like we wanted to be something that was a little bit different. So we acknowledged, okay, I'm not native Japanese, so I can be a little more forward than other people can. So let's use the word I love you, because that is a very direct phrase that most Japanese would not say, like they wouldn't say directly. And that kind of like, that gap of like, it's a little bit like embarrassing to say. If it was me, it's not embarrassing. So I think we can kind of use it as I'm the bridge for people to express the things that they don't normally get to express. And that became the concept. So I Love You was like, let's be very direct. Let's say this is a song that was originally kind of written for a female vocalist, but let's make it a guy. Let's make it a guy song about, falling in love and breaking up and having this heartbreak and all the things that a guy would probably want to say, but is a little bit too embarrassed to say in that situation. So it was a very deep song. It was a very heartfelt song. And we released that after my debut. It was the year after my debut. It became the single for 2014, and it was fine. It was well received, and it was good. But it didn't actually break and like become a huge thing until like 2017. So it was an unusual experience with that song.
Really?
Yeah.
I think I was like junior high or high school at the time.
Yeah, I've been around
The
for a while now.
The song was played everywhere.
Yeah,
everywhere
in
town.
2014, we had a good run with it for a while, but then we moved back on, the label wanted to move on to another cover album, so I think really promoted the song for like about 2 or 3 months, and then we started moving on to other stuff, but it had a really popular promotional video, and people sang it in karaoke. But right when I was gonna go on a 2-year hiatus, the day I think I announced it, someone covered it on a TV show and it blew up, and it was like in the top 100 of the karaoke rankings for like 2 or 3 years. So it was a very weird thing. Like it got really popular when I wasn't doing anything.
You mentioned karaoke. What type of role karaoke plays in the Japanese everyday music, or the music industry as a whole?
They say it's changing. They say it might not be as strong as it used to be, but I know like it links a lot of people to core memories, like being able to go someplace and sing the songs you remember from a certain time in your life. I think like in the States, when people think of like karaoke, they're like, they think of like a bar and everyone's getting drunk and they're just singing things and kind of letting it all out. I think it's a little more therapeutic for Japanese people. You might be going with your bosses or your friends, or you're just going there, but you're gonna sing songs that like, you kind of have to think about it. Like you're like, first of all, you're singing by yourself, then you're gonna sing songs that mean a lot to you. If you're singing with other people, what are songs they're gonna know that they can kind of like get into? Otherwise, you're gonna be that person to sing a song that nobody knows and it's awkward for 5 minutes. So it's kind of a weird social experience. But I think a lot of it just has to do with connecting with other people or connecting with something that really means something to you.
I think it's a very rightful observation.
Have you had that experience?
Oh yeah. Like you have to think first what others would like.
There's a lot of preparation, and people ask me about like karaoke, like what's the best thing to do? Like first of all, don't start with like the most wild song because you're gonna blow your voice and you can't go that long. Start with something really medium and cool, and make sure it's a song that everybody can get into, but not too early because you're gonna be drinking. It's a whole thing. It's a lot of work actually.
All right, so people started singing in karaoke your songs, and then that kind of gets you also like kind of blew up as well.
Yes. It was like I started with covers so we could introduce myself and show that these are songs that I've known for the same amount of time as everybody else. So it was just a self-introduction, and that kind of became its thing. And we released I Love You, and it was very popular, and we just let it kind of sit where it was. But from when I went on hiatus, then I started being the artist that was being covered by other people. So I've been on both sides of this thing now, where I've covered a lot of people and I've now been covered by a lot of people. So it's an interesting flow of events right there.
Oh, okay. So you mentioned Japanese people would feel too embarrassed.
Yeah.
And Japan is a country where people feel embarrassed very easily.
Yeah.
Do you have any insights into it?
And that's a hard concept to explain to people. And I think a lot of people who come from outside of Japan and come here, I think they tend to call it shame or embarrassment, and I don't have the exact word because it's not. It's just a lot of consideration about what's going on around you, and that can be shame and that can be embarrassment. But sometimes it's just considering what's happening with everyone else around you. So I know like people don't always talk about their issues with friends because they don't want to trouble their friends because they're not sure if their friends will understand them, or if their friends are going through something that's just as heavy. Like we've had a lot of songs that even beyond like I Love You, I have a song called Memento, which is just a song about thanking your parents, which is very popular with people because they don't often feel confident enough to directly say thank you to their parents. So they're kind of like using it through the song. They would say like they would play the song with their parents in the car, so they wouldn't have to actually say it, but I would say, like, I'm so glad that I'm your child in the song, and that would be how they would express it to their friends or to their family. So I think that happens a lot as people use music to convey the things that are just really hard to say in person. And there's a little bit of anxiety about how the person will respond. There's a little bit of a concern about if it's saying too much or doing too much. But I don't think it's all bad. I think it's just something you have to get used to, and you have to kind of balance the best you can. So that's why we're very direct in my songs, is we're just direct about the things that are really important to say.
So you sound like you have been sounding like as if you have a lot of observations, insights, considerations about Japanese culture.
You experience a lot. Yeah.
Do you still have any confusing moments living in Japan?
No, because and I've tried to like understand like why am I still here? Why did I naturalize to Japanese citizenship? And why have I never been homesick for like the States? And again, I think it's because I didn't have expectations. I think if you were to come to Japan from like anime, you want everything to be like an anime world, it's not that. Or if you came because you liked a certain genre of music and then that genre of music is no longer popular, then you have nothing. I only came because I liked being in Japan. My experience is just based on what I'm experiencing from day to day. It's not like, oh, I wish Japanese were more this or more that. My friends are this, my family is this. Japanese people that I interact with are very broad in their own ways. Like it's even hard to say all Japanese are any one thing. So I don't have any expectations, so it's never a shock when things go differently. It's just, this is the situation that I'm in at the time.
What's your favorite thing in Japanese culture?
Favorite thing in Japanese culture? Honestly, I think it's that freedom. And I think it's hard for people to think that Japan has freedom when they think of like how outgoing you could be in another country. But for me, it's the freedom of living the way I want to be. I think if you try and be extremely upfront about who you are, and you're like, look at me, I am this person, this is how I dress, this is what I do, this is my culture, yeah, people are gonna look at you strange, and that happens to me even in the States. But I think if you're just if you're only focused on your own experience and your own like pocket of Japan, it's extremely freeing. There's a community that definitely probably likes the same things that you do. You're free to dress as you want, free to act as you want. And most people are not going to say anything about it. It's just you're free to be yourself. I'm free to enjoy all of the genres that I sing. I'm free to be the singer that I want to be. I'm free to be an actor from sometimes. I can do anything I want because people are not telling me that I cannot be those things. I think just some people feel a pressure to not be those things because they feel like they're being judged by other people when that may not be the case.
Interesting. So still a lot of Japanese people, especially younger people, younger generation, have many issues. Expressing themselves.
And I see that with a lot of people who are like, I'm gonna go abroad because I don't feel like I'm being judged there anymore. And I think it's perspective. I've had it on both sides. I've been judged in the States, and I've been what I perceived as being judged in Japan. And then realize that when you just stop caring about it and you just worry about your own experience, any place can be the place you want it to be. Any place can be fun. Any place can be a place where you're free to express yourself the way you want to. Japan is the one that I choose. It's the place that I feel is just easy to live. It's just a very nice rhythm for me. But I think if you think the answers are someplace else, you're probably going to be disappointed. Like I've seen like a lot of people, I think one of the biggest issues that happens with people who come to Japan or who even go abroad is that a lot of the things they blame as like the things that they had the most trouble with, the things that they're constantly struggling with, is really just growing up. So a lot of people will be like, I don't like how long you have to work in Japanese companies, but I worked just as long in the States. It's the same thing. Like I don't like how hard it is to like pay taxes or have to do all these other things. Like, but you do those things in other countries anyways. I think a lot of people have a hard time finding themselves as they're growing up in a society that's just constantly changing. And it's kind of like, you're no longer a child, now you're an adult, now you're 30, now you're 40. And those experiences are not about necessarily where you're at, but more about how you deal with them at the time. And I think it's very easy to say, oh, well, Japan is the reason why I'm not having a good time. But I think a lot of people that I've seen, a lot of friends who have gone back to the States, they have the same problems when they get back to the States, and they're like, well, I guess it wasn't Japan.
As you continue your music career in Japan, what challenges or new ventures would you like to take on in the future?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't have any plans, so I've done more than I anticipated. I started as a singer of cover songs, is what I think a lot of people expected from me, and then I had an original song that hit, and then I've self-produced and I've written and I've performed and I've written for other people. I've acted. I don't know. I think I never saw myself doing things internationally because it was never a necessity or particularly an interest. But I want to just keep having fun. I'll keep doing music for as long as it's fun, and if it's not fun, I'll stop doing it, and I'll do something else because, again, I have the freedom to just kind of pick and choose who I want to be. So I'm just gonna ride the music train for a little while longer, and then maybe I'll stop and, I don't know, run an AI company. I don't know. We'll see.
All right. So that was all from my side.
Yeah.
Do you have any other particular stories, any stories you'd like to talk about?
The entire story is very strange. I don't know. I think I just, I hope people enjoy Japan. That's all I hope. I hope people don't give up on the experience too soon, thinking that the culture is the reason or that they can't be accepted here or that they can't have a good time. I think what I've especially found from like living in Tokyo for the past 16 years, but traveling around the country for the entire time, is that the only way you're ever going to feel happy where you go is if you find your community, if you find the people that you can relate to and the people you can rely on. And that's not necessarily just about like Japan or America. Like, it's just you have to find your circle so that you can feel like you're connected to something. And I have a friend who just found his circle in Japan too, and I think he was almost considering leaving Japan at one point, and then he finally found his people and realized that Japan wasn't the problem. He just wasn't finding what he needed at the moment. So I hope people will come to Japan, enjoy it, find their circle, find their community, and if they want to stay long term, stay, and if they don't, go to the next place and have just as good a time.
All right, Chris, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
How did you like it?
It's fun. I haven't done an I haven't done an interview in English in a long time. I always have to think about which words I'm trying to think about, like what's coming out lately. I only hope that people understand, like, I think people assume that like I am all forgiving of things and that I have no critiques or anything of like Japan. And it's not really the case. I just, it's an interesting experience. I think Japan is pretty cool. It's pretty fun to be in. But I think you just have to disconnect from like all of the noise.
Right.
So hopefully that'll come across. Yeah.
Right. Very interesting. Yeah, thanks for your time.
Thank you.